19-year-old Melbourne woman who's been missing for more than a month.
48-year-old James Rich was reported missing around 8:30 this morning from the Envive nursing home just off of Rockville Road.
Every year, thousands of people disappear around the world, leaving behind questions and heartache. While many are never found or are discovered in tragic circumstances, there are extraordinary cases where individuals reappear after years or even decades, often with bizarre and inexplicable stories about their time away. In today's video, we're diving into 15 of these incredible cases where missing people were eventually found, and the mysteries surrounding their disappearances took strange turns. Number 1, J.C. Dugard. One of the most well-known instances of child kidnapping in the U.S. was the tragic case of J.C. Dugard. 1991 saw the kidnapping of 11-year-old J.C. outside her house by a guy going by the name of Philip Garrido. Garrido and his wife would keep her in a tiny cabin behind their home. Her 18 years would be spent in this state, utterly isolated from the outside world and subjected to abuse on a regular basis. She gave birth to 2 girls while she was being held captive, and she also suffered from a severe case of Stockholm Syndrome, which made her feel dependent on her captors. However, as it occurred, college administrators thought Garrido's manner was very peculiar when he brought his 2 daughters, whom he had fathered with Dugard, to UC Berkeley in 2009. After informing the Berkeley police, they had him jailed while they investigated. At first, Dugard, who was there when the questions were being asked, lied and said that she was his cousin. However, if the issue was pursued further, it would become apparent that she was a hostage, and the case would be completely opened up. After Garrido and his spouse were apprehended and incarcerated, Dugard battled for years in treatment to overcome her sympathies for the pair who had abused her during her 18-year incarceration. Number 2, Steve Carter. Steve Carter, a man who was adopted, faced unanswered questions about his early years. He discovered his birth certificate was 1 year after his real birthday, and his parents were unaware of the truth. After researching MissKids.com, he discovered a missing child named Mark Panama Barnes. Carter discovered that his birth mother had mental health problems and would disappear for days at a time. His father, Mark Barnes, reported the missing child to the authorities in 1977. After researching, Carter discovered that his mother had taken false names and birth dates for the 2 of them when she fled with him as a baby. The baby was placed in protective custody and was scheduled to receive a reprimand at a mental health facility. After a few days, his mother vanished and was never seen again. Carter ended up in an orphanage only 30 miles from the place where his father had been looking for him. 3 years later, his adoptive parents adopted him under a false birth certificate. 3 years later, Steve and his father were reunited, and DNA testing confirmed their relationship. Today, Carter is in his 60s and continues to explore his roots and the mystery surrounding his adoption. Number 3, Nguyen Thi Van. Parents occasionally overreach in their child rearing and later come to regret it. In 1992, Nguyen Van and her mother were residents of northern Vietnam. That fateful night, she returned home late, only 16 years old. Her mother also confined her outside the house as a form of punishment. She did not wait to be allowed back in since she was disobedient. Rather, she went out with some friends to enjoy herself at a karaoke club. At the bar, she would run across a woman who seemed really nice at first, but then put something in her drink and started selling drugs to her and her companions. They were taken to China, where they were made to wed elderly men who were as old as 80 or 70 years old. She was pushed into marriage and forced to be a housewife for the next 21 years as her mother continued to look for her missing daughter. Fortunately, she managed to get away with the aid of a truck driver and eventually returned to Vietnam. When her mother returned home, she was ecstatic and overcome with guilt for having locked her daughter outside the house in the first place. Her mother had already come to the conclusion that her daughter was dead. Number 4, Carlos Sanchez. Carlos Sanchez, a physician in Seville, Spain, struggled with acute depression, and disappeared without a trace from his hometown. A search was launched in 1996, but Carlos was never found. In 2010, 15 years after his death, he was formally pronounced deceased. In 2015, two mushroom pickers encountered an isolated man in a Tuscan forest who claimed to have lived alone for over 20 years. Locals witnessed this unusual individual in the jungle, and when they learned of Carlos's existence, they traveled to Tuscany. However, Carlos had moved on and did not want to be found. The mushroom pickers contacted a missing person organization, which helped them find Carlos's parents. Although they respected their son's wishes, his parents would still look for him, ensuring his safety and giving him a final hug. Number 5, Lucy and Johnson. Lucy Johnson, a woman from Surrey, Canada, disappeared in 1961. Her husband, who was married to her, was the main suspect in the case, despite having knowledge of her whereabouts. A nationwide search was launched, but nothing was ever discovered. The case remained unsolved for years, and her daughter Linda, who was 60 years old at the time, decided to pursue the search in 2012. In 2012, the police brought attention to the case as a cold case, and Linda published a missing persons notice in multiple newspapers across British Columbia and the Yukon. A woman claimed to be Lucy's daughter and contacted the police, claiming that Lucy was still alive and well in the Yukon. Linda then made a direct route to the Yukon, and she could instantly recognize her mother. Lucy had fled her abusive husband years ago, refusing to take her brother and daughter with her. She left, eventually settling in the Yukon and starting a new family. Linda was relieved that her mother was alive and well, but she still had unanswered questions, such as why she never returned for her and her brother during those years. Number 6, William Burgess Powell. A man known as Burger King Doe was found coated with fire ants in Richmond Hill, Georgia, in 2004. After being brought to the hospital, he lost his memory of his name. Physicians surmised that he had amnesia, perhaps brought on by a traumatic experience. He was able to recall just his birth date, 3 brothers, and that he was from Denver, Colorado. He took up the name Benjamin Kyle and appeared on national news shows as well as the FBI's missing persons page after struggling to identify himself for years. He was mentioned in a Dr. Phil episode as well, but nobody was able to recognize him. His DNA was matched to that of William Burgess Powell in 2016, a genealogist who discovered Powell had vanished from his Lafayette, Indiana home in 1976. Even still, between his 1976 disappearance and his 2004 discovery, a big question remained unsolved. Throughout those 28 years, he is not known to have worked or resided anywhere, leading some to speculate that he may have been abducted or abandoned. There is no record of him ever having a social security number, so a new one has been issued to him. Number 7, Dioma Gray. In 2007, 20-year-old Andrew Joshua Tafoya kidnapped Dioma Gray, a 15-year-old girl. Tafoya took her to Mexico and manipulated her into getting married. Dioma's parents hired a private investigator to track down the stolen vehicle they used to travel to Mexico. When they were discovered working at an Acapulco resort, Dioma informed her parents that she was not a hostage and was there of her own free will. After extensive intervention, Dioma was reunited with her family in 2011. Tafoya was the target of a police manhunt until his arrest in 2012. He entered into a plea agreement in 2012, admitting to 2 counts of concealing a minor and accepting a 2-year jail term. However, Dioma Stockholm syndrome was discovered to be serious. A few months after Tafoya's sentencing, Dioma moved in with his parents and called him her husband during the sentencing process. Number 8, Amanda Berry, Michelle Knight, and Gina DeJesus. Ariel Castro, a local school bus driver who lived in a rundown basement close to the abduction site, kidnapped 3 missing children in Cleveland, Ohio. The police suspected Castro had kidnapped the girls and taken them out of the state. Castro had taken the girls hostage 3 times. taking Amanda Berry, Michelle Knight, and Gina de Jesus. In 2004, Castro abused all 3 women, leaving them half-starved and chained up in a dark room. Amanda Berry became a mother in 2006, 4 years after being taken into custody. In 2013, all 3 women were his prisoners for over a decade when he neglected to secure the door. Amanda Berry managed to escape the house with her daughter and call the police. Castro was captured and saved the other ladies. Ariel Castro faces over 900 counts of kidnapping, molestation, and serious assault, and if found guilty, he would be sentenced to life in prison plus an additional 1,000 years without the chance of release. Not even a year into his sentence, he committed suicide by hanging. Number 10. Petra Pasitka. In 1984, 24-year-old Petra Pasic disappeared from Brashi, Germany. Her family suspected homicide, leading to a thorough search and a German true crime program. In 1987, police named a man they believed to be Gunter K., who admitted to killing her. Despite later changing his mind, Petro remained missing. She was pronounced dead in 1989, 6 years after going missing. In 2015, a woman reported a burglary in her flat, but she couldn't show a legitimate ID. She claimed to be Petra, who had been missing for nearly 30 years. She avoided detection by not obtaining a driver's license, a social security number, or opening a bank account. She has never tried to pass for someone else or used fake identification. Police have confirmed that she cannot be charged with any crimes because she has no desire to be located or share her whereabouts with her family or the public. He was supposed to be reported missing in action until 2014, when it was uncovered. In reality, Bergdahl was being imprisoned in a Taliban prison camp as a prisoner of war. At that point, 3 Taliban detainees at Guantanamo Bay were exchanged for President Barack Obama's release through negotiations. When word spread of his release, it sparked intense controversy. In actuality, he disregarded all orders and left his post. In an attempt to record the poor management of his base, he had set out to walk to another location. However, he was captured while traveling and held captive by the Taliban for 5 years. Instead of being greeted as a hero upon his return, Bergdahl was accused of desertion, a charge to which he entered a guilty plea. In addition to a $1,000 fine and a dishonorable discharge, he received a promotion from sergeant to private. Number 11. Edgar Latvalip. Edgar Latvalip, a Canadian native, was a missing person who lived in a group home for 30 years, without any knowledge of his identity or family. He suffered from a psychological disorder and was discovered near Niagara Falls at the age of 12. Edgar could not remember his name or his roots. With the help of a social worker, he experienced memory flashbacks and was able to recall his name. Edgar was from Kitchener, Canada, around 80 miles from his current residence. In September 1986, Edgar ran away from a mental health facility and planned to commit suicide. He boarded a bus to Niagara Falls but suffered a head injury, causing acute amnesia and losing all memory of his identity and origins. He made his home in the Niagara region for the next 30 years. His family was feared dead, but it was later found that he was merely injured and may not have had excellent recall. When his memory came back, Edgar's 52-year-old replica appeared on television, and his family recognized him immediately. Edgar was reunited with him after contacting Wilson Sylvia at the Niagara Police Department. Edgar's mother was overcome with emotion when she finally saw her son. Number 12, a missing woman unknowingly joins the search for herself. An unidentified woman went missing while on a tour of Iceland. She spoke fluent English and was described as Asian. Authorities in southern Iceland reported that other tour members were unable to locate the woman, leading to a restart of the police-approved search. When the woman got off the tour bus but never returned, she changed her clothes at a bus stop. When the description of the missing woman was passed around, she failed to recognize it. and none of the other tourists recognized her. She then participated in the quest for herself, with over 50 people participating in the search, some on foot and some in vehicles. The search lasted over 2 days before the woman identified herself as Asian, standing 100 to 60 centimeters tall, and speaking fluent English. She changed her clothes at the last bus stop, and the hunt was canceled. This incident highlights the peculiar nature of the Icelandic search for an unknown woman. Number 13, Harrison O'Keefe. An unexpected ocean swell in 2013 threw a tugboat carrying 12 crew members into the water, which caused the boat to capsize. The crew members were thought dead, but a dive team was sent to remove their bodies. A diver who had been swimming through the boat's passageways for 60 hours suddenly felt fingers seizing him. It was revealed that the survivor was Harrison Oy, the chef. Oy managed to survive for almost 60 hours without food, water, or oxygen. He was given a special suit by the crew and started his slow journey back to the ocean's surface. Before being reintegrated into society, Oy had to recover from nitrogen poisoning for 2 days in a decompression chamber. Oy believes his survival to be a miracle, and the story has left many believing in the miracles that can occur in the face of adversity. Number 14. Winston Bright. When Winston Bright vanished in 1990, leaving behind his wife Leslie, the strange case of Winston Bright started. Bright was the subject of a nationwide search, and his wife was constantly visiting local TV stations to keep her husband's disappearance on the air. Then, after years of looking for signs, he was deemed legally deceased. Winston Bright's wife would be allowed to receive his pension and take care of their children when he was pronounced deceased in 2001. Things would change in an odd way. A man came forward and admitted that yes, he was Winston Bright 20 years later. He claims that in 1990 he suffered from amnesia and ended up in California, where he adopted a new identity and name. However, he claimed that he started to regain his memories and that he came back to correct the record, saying that he was still alive and that he was, in fact, Winston Bright. Testing with DNA would prove he was Winston Bright. However, his wife was not pleased that he had returned primarily to collect his pension, which she had been receiving for the previous 10 years. His wife was among the many who didn't think his account of amnesia was true. Overall, though, they were relieved he was still alive and well. Number 15, Julian Hernandez. Julian Hernandez, a student, was unaware of his kidnapping until he applied for a scholarship and obtained university documents. He discovered that his social security number did not match his name, and his name was on the National Registry of Missing Persons. His father, Bobby Hernandez, lost custody of his son in 2002 and abducted him at the age of 5. They altered their social security numbers and names and resettled in a different state for 13 years, defying court orders. Despite his mother's 10-year search, Julian lived in peace. Bobby was arrested, accused of kidnapping and abduction, and sentenced to prison. Julian begged the judge for mercy, claiming that his father was his primary inspiration due to his kindness and good treatment. Bobby received a 4-year jail sentence after admitting to all the crimes brought against him.